Starting off this session great with a premium of ace-king suited. We are under the gun and we're going to raise this up to 15. That's the standard raise size for this game. It folds all the way around to the button who decides to 3-bet to 40. And the small blind who only has $1 invested also decides to call to 40. So with the call in between, you definitely have a strong argument saying that this is a mandatory 4-bet. But I know for a fact that the button has a premium. It could be jacks or queens. Both hands do have me beat currently. And so I'm just going to take, I guess, the passive route and I just call. But I instantly regret it as the flop comes ace 7 deuce with 2 hearts. So we have top pair, top kicker, nut flush draw. And when the small blind checks, I'm going to check and flow, hoping that the raiser decides to put out a c-bet, which he should because this smashes his range. But unfortunately, he checks it through. So now we're off to the turn, which is a 3 of diamonds. And now the small blind bets out 50. He could have one of those hands that I said, maybe ace queen, ace jack suited, something along those lines, even ace 5 possibly. But I don't think that I should be putting a raise here because I'm probably going to get fold from everything that I'm beating. So I just call, want to see what the button decides to do, and weirdly enough, he sticks in the call. So I'm not quite sure what that overcall is, but the river is a magical king. Not that I thought that I was behind at any point in time, but it always feels good to have top 2 pair. But unfortunately, the small blind now decides to check. So now this on me. You could say that I should jam. I have 175. The pot is about 270. But if you think about how the hand played out, after the flop, nobody showed any real strength in the hand. It checked all the way through on the flop. The small blind only bets 50, and there's only a call on the button, and then he checks the river. So I decided to put out a bet that could get called definitely by a weaker ace or maybe an unbelieving pocket pair like, say, jacks or queens or even kings maybe. So I elect to throw out a bet of 100, and the button decides to stick in the call, which is great. What I was not expecting is the small blind to also stick in the call. So I know I have the best hand, only facing 2 calls on the river. So I show my hand, I have ace king, and they both actually show their hands. So the button who 3-bet had pocket jacks, which pre-flop is ahead of me and is a premium. And small blind had a hand I thought he had ace jack. So he overcalled the 3-bet and it kind of, bit him. But it was always great to start off a session winning close to 380 of profit, hand number 1. So let's keep this sun run going. We're going to have another monster pot coming up next. So tell me a hand better than ace king suited. How about ace ace? These aren't suited, unfortunately. I wish that they were. But we are on the button, and there's an under the gun limp, and the +1 decides to raise it up to 15 when it folds to me. I'm going to 3-bet this up to 50. That's mandatory. And what's weird is the limper now decides to call along with the +1. So as far as the limper goes, he could have all these pocket pairs. He could even have a hand as strong as, let's say, jacks or queens and was going to limp raise, but my 3-bet might have froze him. And I don't put the +1 player on anything too strong because if you had, let's say, ace king, kings or queens, he's incentivized to definitely put in that 4-bet. But he might not do that with, let's say, ace king or pocket queens. He wants to see a flop. So either way, we go off to a flop, which comes king 5 deuce. And so what's weird is instead of them checking to me, the original limper decides to bet out for 50. So the +1 calls, and I could be raising this donk, but let's just say he had a hand like jacks or queens and just wants to see where he's at. I would be scaring him off. So I'm just going to put in the call and see what he wants to do on the turn. We're off to a turn, which is the 4 of spades, which does introduce the backdoor spade draw. So now when he bets 125, I know that he doesn't have queens or jacks because my call on the flop is pretty strong. And he wouldn't just be trying to blast into me if he had just queens when I'm calling on the flop. So I'm thinking he either has ace king or he has a set. If he has a set, then it's just my time to die. But I decided to jam for his remainder of 195. And so he thinks about it for a while. He thinks out loud. He asks me, are we at least chopping? And so I know what he has now. He decides to call. The river is a board pairing 4 of hearts. And so he shows his ace king, I show my aces, and we are good. It is great that 2 hands that we play back to back are both massive pots, and in just the 2 hands we are already up about 650, maybe 700 early into the session. So hopefully we can keep this sun run going. The player that I stacked, he buys back in. He said he's ready to battle. So let's see what happens in the next hand. Okay, so hopefully we can keep this sun run going. We built up a massive stack already now, especially for a 1-3. So now we have pocket nines in the +1. I decided to raise it up to 15. The small blind, who was actually one of my best friends, his name is Ash, he decides to stick in the call, and the under the gun player who limped decides to also call. So we're going off to a flop, which is 6-5 deuce with 2 spades. And so seeing as that I have an overpair, which is pretty rare with pocket nines, I decided to throw out a bet of 20, which is about a little less than half pot, and only my friend decides to call. So now we're going heads up to the turn, which is a 9, which at face value seems really, really great, but it does bring in 7-8. So I'm going to check it to my friend to see how strong his hand is, and he actually puts out a bet of 60. So he's a 2-5 and 5-10 player, so he definitely could be putting in moves from time to time, but from my experience, normally when he's betting big, he does have a strong hand. So I just decided to call, and now the river is a queen, and now I check again, and my plan was to go all in on any bet that was 100, 110 or less, and probably just call with a bet that's bigger than that. And he actually puts out a bet of 150. So I know you're thinking, what are you doing? Just jam. He only has about 100 left, 125 left. And you would be right, but weirdly enough, this is his absolute favorite hand. So I'm thinking, what if his favorite hand actually ends up making him money by him turning a straight and me hitting a set? So I know he's not bluffing here. I'm 100% sure he's not bluffing. So there's 2 straights out there. There's 3 floor that flop the straight, and then there's 7-8 that turn the straight. So I even say this out loud. Listen to this audio on why I decide to only call.
If I had any other hand, I would be, if I was against any other person, I would be jamming right now. But I have your favorite hand, so I call. I have your favorite hand.
Oh my God, set over set.
So as you see, he had a set of 6s, so he definitely had a hand that I had beat that would have called my jam. So it's kind of unfortunate. He did set over set me at a home game a few days prior to the session, so it was good to get him back. But either way, that was the last hand that was interesting. I mean, we had a hell of a sun run. There's a few more hands that weren't that interesting. You know, lost about 75. Raising, 4 people call. Can't see better than the 4 or 5 people. Calling raises in position, totally whiffing. But nonetheless, it was a great sun run here, but we have a bonus session. We are taking our talents to another Maryland casino. All right, what's going on YouTube? We got some new scenery. We are here at Maryland Live Casino. 1-3 on a Friday night. It's normally pretty good. It's my first time vlogging here. So I know y'all gonna like to switch out with different casinos, watch me get active. Let's jump in and see if we can stack somebody. So after a few uneventful hands, it leads into this one where we look down at pocket kings. There are 5 limps ahead of me, and on the button, we're gonna raise this up to 25. That's the least you should raise with this much dead money. You don't wanna go 6 ways to a flop by raising to 15. So my $25 raise gets the job done, and only the +1 and the hijack decide to call. And we're off to a great flop, which comes queen, jack, 7. It's a rainbow board, which is great, and also there's no ace, which normally when you have pocket kings, it seems that always happens. And so I also didn't hit my set, which means that they could easily have top pair or second pair and should call down a few streets. There's a couple straight draws, even though I heavily blocked king 10, there is still 9-10. So either way, they check and floated me, and I bet 35, +1 folds, and the hijack calls. So I'm thinking that either he has a draw like 9-10, or maybe he has a queen, or possibly just second pair. So either way, the turn is a 3, and when he checks to me, I'm thinking that if he has top pair, he's definitely going to call a bigger bet at least one more time. So I put out a bet of 70, and he thinks about it for a moment, but unfortunately he actually decides to fold. So didn't get quite the max value on a pretty good board with my kings, but nonetheless, it's always good to finally start winning some hands, getting the money shipping your way. This hand is going to be a little bit different than the last one. So we have King Jack suited under the gun, and I've raised it up to 12. I get 3 calls. After I started learning the table dynamic, I learned I need to raise a little bit larger to only get 1 or 2 calls. It seemed like these smaller raises are just getting 3 and 4 people to call. So either way, we're off to a flop which comes 7, 8, ace. And I decide to check, seeing as that I have so many people in this pot, but everyone checks. And so now the turn is a 7, and I bet 35. And only the small blind calls. Now, the reason why I like that the small blind calls is because he's first to act on the flop. So naturally, he would check it to me on the flop. But seeing as that he also checked it to me on the turn, lets me know that he probably doesn't have an ace. He would bet that after he's seen that the whole action checked on the flop. So now when I call, we're off to a river, which is a 3. So now when he checks, I know that if I put out a small bet, it's definitely going to get called. Obviously, I only have king high. I'm just trying to rep my range. So I'm going to put the pressure on him. I load up the clip. I bet 90. And this is actually a very agonizing tank because he's like playing with his chips, almost putting them forward. He never touches his cards. Normally when people are thinking about folding, they're more touching their cards and touching their chips. So I'm just like, please fold, please fold. But the more he's playing with his chips, I'm thinking he's going to call. And then all of a sudden he just puts his chips down and then mucks his hands. Let's go. We got one through with king high. So after getting that bluff through, I'm feeling pretty great. In this hand, we're looking at pocket fives and the big blind. There's a +1 raise to 7, almost a min raise. It folds around, small blind decides to call. I could be squeezing here, but sometimes players will do things like this just to be tricky with aces or kings. So I don't really want to see that. So I decided to just call, realize my equity. In equity, we realize the flop comes queen, 5-10 with 2 clubs. So the small blind checks and flow, as do I, knowing that the raiser should definitely put out a C bet. And unfortunately, he does not. So when the turn is a 6 of heart, the small blind decides to bet 11. I decide to just call. Reason being is I know that the +1 doesn't have anything. If they had a flush draw or if they had top pair or even an over pair, they would have bet the flop with a flush draw out there. So this is slightly risky. The small blind could definitely have a flush draw, but I call as played and +1 folds. So now we're going heads up to the river, which is an ace. It is a good and a bad card. It's a good card, meaning that if small blind, let's say, had an ace high flush draw, they're now backed in the top pair. But it's a bad card. Let's just say they had a queen or something that might scare them when I bet. But nonetheless, when he checks, I'm going to go ahead and throw out a decent sized bet, I guess. I throw out 25. He snap calls me. And he actually does show me that he had ace X of clubs. And so I guess my read was right. If that's the case, I definitely actually should have put a raise on the turn. He definitely would have called, and then he probably would have called the river when he hit his top pair. So I don't really think that I played that correctly, although I am getting a pot ship my way. Sometimes you gotta just evaluate. Even when you win pots, you can play them wrong. I don't know if I really played that right. Y'all can leave y'all comments down about this hand. Thank you. Next hand. Unfortunately, I have to show you a hand that I played very poorly. We're looking at a king-10 offsuit on the button. I raised it up to 12. Only the big blind calls. We go to a flop, which is king-jack 7 with 2 clubs. So we have top pair. Weak kicker, though. So when he checks, I check. You know, you hear this thing online about pros telling you sometimes you got to check top pair for deception. But this was not the time. I have top pair, the kicker's weak, and there's a flush draw, straight draws out there. Definitely need to be putting in a bet. So anyways, we're going to a turn, which is the 8 of club, which instantly brings in the flush. So now when he bets 10, only thing I do is call. And now we're off to a river, which is the 10 of spades. So he now bets 15, and I'm debating if I should raise or not. But at the last second, I see that there's a one-liner, meaning any 9 would make a straight. And so I just decided to call, but I also fast roll my hand because I do have 2 pair. And he looks at his cards for a moment, so I'm thinking that I have the winner. And then he's like, oh no, I have a straight. He shows me pocket nine. So he backed himself into a straight. And this was such a horrible play because if I just see bet the flop, he's not going to call very often. Even if he does, I can put max pressure on that turn card and make him fold because he had the nine of spades and the nine of diamonds. So he didn't have a flush draw to go with it. And I definitely could have took this hand down if I would have played a lot differently. But that's the great thing about this vlog. I don't just show you my glory hands. I also show you the hands that I play poorly and let you talk all that shit about my hands and my play, but it's all good. I like to hear the critiques. So if you have any critiques about any of the hands that I played, just drop them down in the comments. Y'all know I respond to all of them. So anyways, next hand. In this next hand, we're looking at a beautiful suited wheel ace, ace five of spades. We are under the gun and we raised it up to 12. We get two callers, so we're going three ways to a flop, which is 9-5-3 with two clubs. So we have middle pair with a flush draw board, and we're going to see better range. We can still have all the over pairs, ace king of clubs, ace queen of clubs, which still has a ton of equity against top pair. And the bet of 20 gets one caller, and it's the same player that had the pocket nine. So I actually definitely want to win this pot versus him. And so the turn is the six of heart. It introduces a backdoor flush draw. So now I'm going to put out a half pot size bet of 40. And by his pacing, he called rather quickly. So I don't think that he has a 9 because he would probably think about if he should raise or not. But we off to a river, which is the queen of heart. So that's a good card in the sense of if he thinks I would have had a lot of ace king, ace queens, king queens, queen jack suited, raising under the gun, it now got there. So I want to put out a bet that doesn't look extremely bluffy. It looks like it's value, but also doesn't give him a cheap price to call with, let's say, like pocket sevens or 8-9, and I'm beat. So I throw out a decent sized bet of 90, and he thinks about it for not too long. It says that queen must have helped me, and then he folds. So I think that he probably just had a flush draw. I think even if he had a hand like pocket eights, he probably would at least thought about it for at least about 20 seconds before he folded. But he doesn't, and I don't know if it's a bluff that we got through, but either way, the pot's coming our way. Let's go. Now we're here at the last hand of the session, and it will not disappoint. So I have ace-10 offsuit in the small blind. There's a button raised to 6. You could say you could put in another raise, but I'm just going to call, see what happens. Big blind calls, +1 limper decides to call as well. So we're 4 ways to the flop, which comes 10, 7, deuce. So we now have top pair, top kicker, but there is a flush draw on the board. But I'm going to check and flow, and the big blind doesn't catch that memo because he donks out for 10. +1 gets out the way, but the button decides to call. Now, you could say I should be putting a raise here because there's a flush draw and for value protection against overcards, but at the same time, the button is the initial raiser, so he could already still have all of the kings, all of the queens, all of the jacks. So I'm not going to value on myself in that way. I'm going to evaluate a turn, and the turn is an ace of clubs. So we now have top 2 pair. Pretty excited about this, hoping that I see another bet, and we do. Big blind decides to put out a bet of 30. Now I'm hoping that the button had a hand like ace king and was floating or something like that, but unfortunately he lays it down. So I'm not playing around no more. Big blind only has 65 left. I rip it all in. He doesn't think about it for more than a second or two, and he calls. I'm thinking he might have a flush draw because I got all the value hands pretty much covered unless he has a set, but I don't think that he would lead with a set. So he actually tells me he has 7 deuce, so he flopped 2 pair, and that's what he donked with. So now we have that totally crushed. He's drawing the 4 outs and 4 outs only, and we see a clean river. I'm gonna let you see the run out, and we scoop it up for the last hand and an all in with top 2 pair. Let's go. We don't leave immediately after this. We don't want to make it seem like we're hitting and running, but after he left, another action player left, so I decided to call it a night. I'm going to catch you in the outro. We're going to tally this up and see how the session went. All right, that's it for the video. We had One session was at MGM where we won $850. That's the biggest win of the vlog. Let's go. Second session was at Maryland Live. We got a couple bluffs through, made a couple big hands, and we won $343 there, bringing the total win for the video up to $1193, and bringing the new bankroll total up to $8,773. We only have $1,227 left to go until we're completed, and we'll be moving up to 2.5 permanently. So I appreciate y'all watching. Like, comment, and subscribe as always. And until the next video, holla.